I wasn't supposed to be home for another 5 days, but a storm cut my trip short. And thank God it did, because the second I pulled into my ranch, I saw strangers walking around with clipboards, inspecting it. At first, I thought I had the wrong property. Then I heard her voice, Karen, my HOA president, telling them, the auction will start in an hour. Auction. My ranch. My heart dropped. I hadn't missed a single payment, I hadn't broken any rules, so why was she acting like she owned the place? When she turned and saw me standing there, her face froze.
The drought
She
impact
stuttered,
is
she
severe
panicked,
across the
and then she
entire
tried to call
property.
911 on Emmy,
So the
claiming I
foreclosure
was
is still
trespassing
set
on my
for
own
tomorrow.
land. That's when I
We have to
realized
follow the
this wasn't a
procedure.
mistake. Karen had a secret plan, and my early return just blew it wide open.
Stay
And
alert.
what I uncovered next, it wasn't just illegal, it was evil. I wasn't supposed to be home. Not yet. According to the itinerary I gave the HOA office, and the one I casually mentioned to Karen, the woman who seemed to run the entire neighborhood like her own personal kingdom, I should have still been in Arizona. I should have been driving through dusty roads, taking photos of red canyons, and enjoying the silence of being far away from the HOA's constant complaints and ridiculous rule reminders. But life has a way of throwing storms at you, literally and figuratively. On the third night of my trip, a massive thunderstorm rolled in. A sudden one. The kind that shakes the entire sky and makes your phone emergency alerts scream at you like you're in the middle of a national disaster movie. Roads were shutting down. My rental cabin lost power. The roof started leaking, and the place felt unsafe. I realized staying wasn't worth it, so I packed my bags, returned the rental early, and headed back home. I wasn't excited to return. My ranch was my sanctuary, but the HOA had been on my nerves for months. Every week, there was a new letter, a new fine, a new complaint that felt invented. According to Karen, the grass was too wild, the fence was too rustic, the barn paint was too faded, and even my truck was too loud at unnecessary hours. Unnecessary hours? It was 4 p.m. How was that an unnecessary hour? But that was the thing about Karen. When she didn't like someone, she weaponized the HOA rulebook like a medieval queen swinging a sword. And for some reason, she really, truly didn't like me. Still, coming home early wasn't supposed to be a big deal. I thought I'd unlock the gate, feed my horses, shower, maybe sleep a bit. That was it. Instead, the moment I turned onto my road, I saw something that made my stomach twist into a knot so tight it felt like it cut off my breath. There were cars. A lot of cars. They were parked along the road outside my ranch. Clean SUVs. Luxury sedans. Some with dealer plates. Some with company logos. And then, a truck with a huge trailer attached. At first, I thought someone had broken down. Or maybe there was an accident. But then I saw people. Strangers. Walking through my property. It hit me so fast I slammed the brakes. Dust rose around me, and I just sat there gripping the steering wheel. Strangers on my ranch. At least 8 of them. Dressed nice. Holding clipboards. Checking the barn. Taking photos of the house. Inspecting the fencing. Looking over the land like they owned it, or were about to. I felt a wave of anger crash into me. Shock next. Then confusion. It all tangled together until my heart was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stepped out of my truck and called out, "Excuse me, what are you doing on my property?" One woman jumped, startled. A man beside her whispered, "I thought the owner wasn't arriving until next week." I took a few steps closer. "I am the owner." That's when I heard her voice. The one voice I'd recognize anywhere. Karen. Sharp. Commanding. Fake sweet with a layer of control underneath. She walked out from behind the barn, holding her tablet like a queen holding a scepter. Her hair perfectly sprayed in place, her HOA badge clipped to her shirt like she was law enforcement instead of a neighborhood volunteer. "Oh," she gasped, freezing mid-step. You're back early." Something in her tone wasn't annoyance. It wasn't surprise. It was panic. Real panic. She tried to smile, but her lips twitched. She looked at the group of people, then at me, then back to them like her brain couldn't process how badly her plan was falling apart. "What's going on?" I asked again, louder this time. The man with the clipboard stepped forward cautiously. We're here for the pre-auction walkthrough. Pre-what? I blinked. Auction? Of what? He hesitated. Looked at Karen. Then back at me. Your ranch, he said. It felt like the ground tilted. For a moment, I genuinely thought I misheard him. My ranch. Being auctioned. Who approved that? The man pointed at Karen. The HOA president. She said the property was being surrendered due to non-compliance and abandonment. Abandonment. I nearly laughed. I had been gone for 3 days. Karen stepped forward quickly, shaking her head like they were the ones making a mistake, not her. It's all a misunderstanding, she said. He wasn't supposed to be back yet. I mean, we were told he left indefinitely. Indefinitely? I repeated. Karen, you saw me pack. You saw me leave. I told you I'd be gone for one week. She swallowed hard. We had concerns. Concerns? I stepped closer. Or were you hoping to get rid of me before I had the chance to fight it? Her eyes flashed with something I had never seen in her before. Guilt. Real guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but instead of answering me, she grabbed her phone and said loudly, I need to call the sheriff. This man is trespassing. The group gasped. The clipboard man looked horrified. Even the woman who had been photographing my barn stepped back in disbelief. You're calling the police on me? I said slowly, trying to make sense of how insane it sounded. Karen lifted her chin. You do not own this land anymore. You left it. You broke the rules. The HOA has the right to reclaim mismanaged property. I stared at her, absolutely stunned. Karen, I said, voice low and sharp. Where is the paperwork? She stopped dialing. Because of course, there was none. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't an error in the system. This was a setup. A long-term plan. A secret attempt to take my land while I was gone, and profit from it. Karen, I said again, what were you trying to do? This time, her mask cracked completely. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked afraid. Not of me, but of being caught. And I knew then, that my early return had shattered a plan she'd spent months building. A plan that was only just beginning to reveal itself. Karen didn't answer my question. Not directly. Not even close. Instead, she lowered her phone slightly, her hand trembling just enough for me to notice. The group of buyers, or whatever they were, shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered to each other. Some looked at Karen like she had just dragged them into something messy and illegal. I took a slow breath. My anger was boiling, but my voice stayed calm. Controlled. Everyone, I said, speaking to the group, please step off my property. This auction is not real. It was never authorized. I never received any notice of forfeiture, violation hearing, or lien. Nothing. They looked at each other again. Confused. Embarrassed. One older man cleared his throat. Sir, we were told this ranch had been legally reclaimed. We wouldn't have shown up otherwise. I understand, I said. But none of this is real. Not legally. The group slowly began backing away, gathering at the fence line. They weren't arguing. They weren't pushing back. They were just processing the fact that they had walked into something that smelled like a federal offense. Karen, meanwhile, still stood frozen. I walked up to her, close enough that she couldn't avoid looking me in the eye. Karen, I said, quieter now, you're going to explain everything. Right now. She swallowed hard. This is a misunderstanding. The files got mixed up. I'll email the correct documents. What documents? I cut in. Silence. Karen, I said, there aren't any documents, are there? You forged something. Or you pretended the HOA approved something it didn't. She took a tiny step back. That was all I needed to see. She did do something. She had been hiding something. This wasn't a random idea she came up with yesterday. This was a plan she'd been nurturing, feeding, waiting for the right moment to activate. My early return had ruined her timing. But I still didn't know why she was doing it. So I took a breath and asked the question that burned inside me. Karen, what do you get out of this? She blinked. Her lips parted slightly, but nothing came out. I watched her jaw clench, anger mixing with fear. She wasn't nervous because she was innocent. She was nervous because she was caught too early. Before she could give me even a partial lie, one of the men from the group approached us carefully. He said to Karen, you told us this property had already cleared legal transition. We need proof. Now. Her face turned pale. Proof. The one thing she didn't have. I need to go back to the office, she stammered. There was a fax issue. The board signed. I stepped between her and the group. There is no board approval. And there was no abandonment. I left for 3 days. My horses were being fed. My neighbor had a key to check the place. Karen's composure slipped again. The HOA has strict rules about rules? I snapped. You want to talk about rules? Fine. Let's talk about how many fake violation letters you sent me. How many complaints you filed even when everything was in perfect compliance. How many times you tried to fine me for unauthorized grass when it was literally the same grass every other ranch has. Her eyes narrowed. Your property has been non-conforming for months. There is nothing non-conforming about my property. I shot back. Unless non-conforming means you don't like seeing me live here. Her jaw tightened. The truth was inching out now, slipping through the cracks she couldn't hold together anymore. The man with the clipboard cleared his throat again. Sir, we'll leave. We don't want trouble. But we will need a statement if any legal claims arise. Of course, I said. The group turned and began heading toward their cars. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others muttered angrily under their breath, who wouldn't be mad after wasting time on a fake auction? But when the last of them left the property, Karen stayed. She didn't leave. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to explain. She just stood there trembling with a cocktail of anger and desperation. You ruined everything, she whispered under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear. I froze. Ruined everything. Not confused the process. Not created trouble. Not misunderstood. No, you ruined everything. That meant she had a multi-step plan. A long-term plan. A scheme she was counting on. And I had accidentally blown up the entire operation simply by returning home early. What exactly did I ruin, Karen? I asked quietly. Tell me why you want me out of here. Why this ranch? Her eyes finally met mine, cold and furious. You don't deserve it, she hissed. My chest tightened. And you do. She didn't answer. Not in words. But the silence was enough. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Karen wanted my ranch. Not for the HOA. Not for the neighborhood. For herself. That's when I realized something else, something bigger. Over the past few months, several neighbors had quietly moved away. 2 families claimed rising fines. Another said the HOA had made life unbearable over compliance issues until they finally sold at a loss. And in all 3 cases, the homes were sold to the same real estate company. A company that, according to public records, had exactly one silent partner. Karen's husband. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen wasn't power-hungry. She wasn't overly strict. She wasn't obsessed with rules. She was running a property acquisition scheme. Force fines. Create stress. Engineer non-compliance. Push homeowners to give up. Acquire properties through loopholes. Then flip them for profit. My ranch, larger than the others, was jackpot money. But I hadn't cracked. I hadn't left. I hadn't sold. So she escalated. She fabricated abandonment. Filed a false reclamation form. Forged a hearing record. And set up an illegal auction. I stared at her in pure disbelief. This is fraud, I said quietly. This is criminal. You won't prove anything, she shot back, but the tremble in her voice betrayed her. I already have enough to start investigating. No, you don't, she snapped. Those people signed NDAs. They won't testify. You think I need them? She hesitated. Because she knew the truth. She had left fingerprints. Emails. Letters. Fake fines. False documents. I didn't need witnesses. I needed paper trails. And she knew it. I'm not going to let you steal my home, I said firmly. Her face twisted, rage swallowing her fear for a moment. I make the rules here. No, I said. The law does. Before she could reply, my phone buzzed. It was my neighbor, Ben. I answered immediately. Hey, what's up? His voice was tense. Are you home? Yeah. Good. I need to show you something. Something Karen doesn't want anyone to see. I felt my stomach drop. What is it? I asked. Proof, he said quietly. Proof she's been targeting you for months. Karen's eyes darted toward me, and I realized she had heard just enough to know what the call meant. Her face drained of color. Because whatever Ben had, it was the missing piece. The one thing she thought she hid too well. The one thing she prayed I would never find. I drove to Ben's place with adrenaline shaking through my whole body. I didn't even say another word to Karen. I just turned, walked to my truck, and left her standing there in the dust of her ruined plan. I could feel her stare on my back the entire time, burning through me like she was trying to drill a hole straight into my spine. But I didn't look back. For the first time since moving into this HOA-controlled nightmare, I had the upper hand. And she knew it. As I drove down the road, I tried to calm my breathing. My heart still hammered with leftover anger, but there was something deeper mixing in: relief. Relief that I wasn't going crazy. Relief that I wasn't imagining the harassment or the letters or the lies. But also fear. Because if she had gone this far, if she forged legal documents, if she staged a fake auction, what else had she done? What was she willing to do next? I pulled into Ben's driveway and parked beside his old Ford pickup. Ben was the kind of neighbor who kept tools for everything and stories for even more. A quiet man, mid-60s, retired, sharp as a cedar needle. He'd been keeping an eye on my ranch while I was gone, feeding the horses, checking the barn, making sure everything was in place. Now he stood on his porch, arms crossed, face tight. He didn't smile. That was the first sign something was seriously wrong. I got out of my truck. You said you had something? Ben nodded. Come inside. Close the door behind you. That alone sent a chill through me. Inside, he led me to his dining table, where a stack of folders, printed emails, and handwritten notes sat neatly organized. Ben didn't do neat. He didn't organize anything unless he meant business. What is all this? I asked. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face before sitting down. It's everything, he said quietly. Everything the HOA hoped you'd never see. I took a slow breath and sat opposite him. Start from the beginning, I said. Tell me what's been going on while I was gone. Ben opened the first folder. It starts with this. He slid a printed email toward me. My name was at the top. Karen's name was at the bottom. The subject line: recommendation for property review, possible reclamation. I frowned hard. I've never seen this. You weren't supposed to, Ben said. She sent it privately to the board members. All 3 of them. I skimmed the email. Every sentence felt like a punch. Words like concerns about mental stability, erratic behavior, unsafe property conditions, owner may be preparing to abandon property. What the hell is this? I muttered, my voice rising. Ben leaned back. Lies. All lies. I've been your neighbor for 3 years. I've never seen you act unstable or unsafe. Your ranch is cleaner than half the ones around here. But she needed ammunition. I clenched the paper in my hand, knuckles whitening. This tone, this story, it was clear. Karen was creating a narrative. A timeline. A set of fabricated events to justify taking my ranch. Why didn't the board call me? I asked. Because Karen told them she was handling it. She said she tried contacting you but you were unreachable and unresponsive to all notices. I shook my head in disbelief. I never got a single notice. Ben nodded grimly. I know. And I can prove that too. He opened another folder. Inside were photos. Lots of them. Photos of envelopes sitting on my fence post. Envelopes that looked like official HOA notices. But they were soaked from rain, torn by wind, never actually delivered to my mailbox. Ben slid them closer. These are all the violation letters she claimed you ignored. Except she never mailed them. She just taped them on your gate at night and took photos in the morning to make it look like you were ignoring them. My hands shook as I flipped through the pictures. Why would she do this? I whispered. Why target me? Ben hesitated, then reached under the table and lifted a small notebook. This, he said, is why. He opened it. Inside were pages of his own handwriting, notes taken over months. Then he pointed to one line, Karen, he'll break before winter. They always do. I froze. You heard her say that? I asked. He nodded slowly. Right outside the HOA meeting last fall. She was talking to someone on the phone. Said she'd get your property one way or another. Said once the paperwork starts, he'll get tired of fighting it. My stomach twisted. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't personal dislike. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a targeted attack with an end goal: take my ranch. Profit from it. Move on to the next victim. I leaned back, trying to breathe through the shock. Okay, I finally said. The fake notices. The false emails. The so-called violations. That's all terrible, but that still doesn't explain the auction. That was illegal on another level. Ben's jaw tightened. Exactly. And that's where things get worse. He opened the last folder. Inside were printed property transfer forms. Official looking. Stamped. Signed. Except. The signatures were wrong. One was spelled incorrectly. Another looked copied and pasted. The date formatting was inconsistent. These are forged, I said immediately. It's obvious. Ben nodded. She filed these at the county office 2 days ago. But there's a problem. He tapped the top page. She used a fake notary stamp. My blood ran cold. Ben, how do you know? Because the notary she used. She passed away last year. My wife knew her personally. I stared at the document again. A dead woman's signature. A dead woman's stamp. Used to steal my property. That's not just fraud, I whispered. That's felony-level fraud. That's years in prison. Ben nodded grimly. I know. Which is why you need to move carefully. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my temples. Karen's going to panic now, Ben continued. She expected to have a week before you got home. She was counting on filing one last form tomorrow, abandonment confirmation. After that, the ranch would have legally transferred. I closed my eyes. One more day. If the storm hadn't forced me home early, if I hadn't returned when I did, I would have lost everything. My land. My home. My animals. My history. Gone. Sold. Stolen. Ben cleared his throat. There's more. I almost didn't want to hear it. But I nodded. Last week, he said, Karen came by my place. Said she needed to inspect the perimeter. I followed her because something felt off. He reached into a folder and pulled out photos taken from a distance, grainy but clear enough. Photos of Karen at my barn. Karen examining my feed room. Karen taking pictures inside my horse stalls. She was trying to document neglect, Ben said quietly. To show the animals were suffering under your care while you were gone. Except I was taking care of them every single day. They had fresh hay, clean water, everything. I swallowed hard. She was creating evidence. Fabricated evidence, Ben corrected. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed. Karen wasn't just greedy. She was methodical. Calculated. Dangerous. She's not going to stop on her own, Ben said. You know that, right? She's going to get desperate now. She'll try to cover her tracks. I know, I said. But I'm not letting her get away with this. He nodded. Good. Because I have one more thing. The biggest thing. He reached under the table again and pulled out a small USB drive. What's that? I asked. Ben looked at me with a mixture of relief and seriousness. It's audio, he said quietly. A recording. Of what? He took a slow breath. Of Karen admitting her plan. My heart stopped. She what? Ben nodded. She admitted everything. Every step. Every lie. Every forged document. And the reason she wants your ranch. My breath caught in my throat. What reason? I asked. Ben hesitated. Then he said the words that changed everything. She wants your land because there's oil under it. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared at Ben, trying to process what he had said. Oil. Under my land. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt too surreal. Too wild. Too strange. My ranch was many things. Peaceful, wide, beautiful. But oil? No one had ever mentioned anything like that. No survey reports. No geological inspections. Nothing. Just dirt, grass, and the soil I'd grown vegetables in for years. Ben, I finally said, you're telling me Karen tried to steal my ranch because she thinks there's oil under it. He didn't blink. Not thinks. Knows. I leaned back slowly, my pulse starting to race again. Explain. Ben slid the USB drive across the table toward me, but he didn't let go of it right away. His fingers held the plastic like it was something dangerous. Something explosive. 2 weeks ago, he began, I was walking my dog early in the morning. Around 5. That's when I saw Karen's car parked behind the community office. The lights were on inside, even though she told everyone the place would be closed for a week because of paperwork audits. I frowned. Okay, I got curious, he continued. So I walked closer, stayed in the shadows, didn't let her see me. She was on a call. On speaker. And she kept pacing around, sounding excited. Nervous. Like she was planning something big. I felt a cold pressure in my chest. And you recorded it? Ben nodded. I didn't mean to at first. But when I heard your name, I pulled out my phone and hit record. Instinct, I guess. I swallowed hard. What exactly did she say? Ben finally released the USB into my hand. Everything, he said. And I mean everything. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. She said she found old drilling maps, he continued. Maps from before our community existed. Your ranch sits on the edge of an old geological zone that was surveyed back in the 1970s. They never drilled here, but the notes show high likelihood of crude pocketing. She said this could be her big break, her retirement plan. She laughed about how easy it would be to push you out with fines. My jaw tightened. She said you wouldn't last, Ben added quietly. Said you were soft. Said once the abandonment paperwork was filed, she'd transfer the property to her husband's investment group for pennies. He paused, shaking his head. And then she bragged about the auction being her final checkmate. My fingers tightened around the USB. Oil. Money. Power. Control. That's what this was. She didn't hate me. She didn't care about the rules. She wasn't obsessed with order. She wanted the land. She wanted the money sitting beneath it. She wanted the credit for acquiring it. And she was willing to destroy my life to get it. I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. So she knew, I said quietly. She knew about potential oil deposits. She knew before I even bought the place. Ben nodded. I think she knew for years. Maybe she found the maps during one of her so-called record audits. She's been using her position to hunt for properties with hidden value. I felt a wave of anger and nausea wash over me. She was running long-term scams. Exactly. She pushed out the Millers last year because their land had copper rights. She harassed the Porters into selling because their property adjusted zoning for commercial potential. This isn't new, son. You're just her biggest target. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think. Trying to breathe. So what now? I asked. Police. A lawyer. The board. Ben looked at me with steady, tired eyes. Now, he said, you need to get ahead of her. And fast. He pushed another small stack of papers toward me. These are copies of the HOA bylaws, he explained. I printed them years ago. Section 6B covers property abandonment. Section 9A covers legal reclamation. Section 12 covers disciplinary misconduct, especially from board members. I skimmed them quickly, spotting key phrases. Abandonment requires 90 days with no contact. Reclamation must follow unanimous board approval. Forgery voids the action and triggers review. Misuse of authority results in immediate suspension. Karen violated nearly every rule, I said softly. All of them, Ben corrected. And you can either go to the sheriff and let this turn into a criminal case, or you can destroy her inside the HOA first. Make her lose everything she used to attack you. I took a long breath. And which do you recommend? Ben thought for a moment. Well, he said finally, the sheriff is the last step. Once you involve them, things get messy. Federal messy. Crossing state lines messy. Fraud with interstate filings messy. But before that happens, he leaned forward. You need the board on your side. I frowned. The board? Karen controls them. Not completely, Ben said. 2 of them are terrified of her. The 3rd hates her. All 3 were manipulated. And all of them will turn against her if you show them what she did. I drummed my fingers on the table. So you're saying I should call a board meeting? Correct. And show them the audio? Correct. And expose the forged documents? Correct. And force them to suspend her? Correct. I stared at him. Ben, I said, they won't want to believe they're complicit. That's why, he said calmly, you need to show them everything at once. Not one piece. All of it. Shock their system. Overwhelm the lies. I nodded slowly. But be careful, he added. Karen's dangerous. Desperate people do desperate things. My stomach tightened. You think she'll try something? Ben hesitated. Then he reached into the last folder and pulled out a single photo. A photo of Karen's garage. In the photo, on the wall, hung a 20-gallon gasoline container. Next to it, a coil of rope. Next to that, bolt cutters. And a crowbar. Karen came by your property the night before you left for your trip, Ben said quietly. She was carrying that crowbar. I stared at him. She was going to plant evidence, he continued. She might have even been planning something worse. I scared her off by turning on my floodlight. Goosebumps spread down my arms. She wasn't just greedy. She was willing to break in. Frame me. Threaten me. Maybe even harm me. She was going to sabotage your barn, Ben clarified. Leave signs of dangerous neglect so the board would accelerate the reclamation. She didn't want to wait another month. I rubbed my face, overwhelmed. So she was ready to commit arson? I whispered. Ben sighed. She was ready to do anything. My hands shook slightly. This wasn't a petty HOA issue anymore. This wasn't neighbor drama. This wasn't just fraud. Karen was willing to risk lives. Property. Animals. Everything. I understood now why Ben had been so serious. Why he gathered all this evidence. Why he told me to act quickly. Where is Karen now? I asked. Ben shrugged. Probably scrambling to fix whatever she can. Probably calling board members. Probably destroying documents. I stood up. I'm calling an emergency board meeting, I said. Tonight. Ben nodded. But before you do, he added, you need to listen to that recording. All of it. So you know exactly what you're dealing with. I swallowed hard. He was right. I needed to hear it. Even if it changed everything. Even if it made things worse. Even if it confirmed Karen's plan was darker than I ever imagined. I took the USB, walked to Ben's spare room with his old laptop, and plugged it in. There was a single audio file inside. Recorded at 5:13 a.m. Labeled simply, Karen, the plan. I clicked play. When Karen called 911 on me, I expected the officers to show up angry, confused, maybe even suspicious of why a man was trespassing on his own ranch. But when the police car finally pulled up, what surprised me most wasn't the officers, it was Karen's face. She looked terrified. Her confidence was gone. Her smug smile was gone. Her loud, bossy HOA president voice was gone. All that was left was a woman who realized her little power game had just spun out of her control. She kept glancing at me, then at her phone, then at the clipboard she held so tightly her knuckles were white. And she kept whispering to herself, This wasn't supposed to happen today, he was supposed to be gone, why is he here? It was like she couldn't believe her own bad luck. When the officers got out of the car, Karen rushed over to them like a drowning person grabbing onto a rope. Officers! Officers! That man is trespassing on this property. This ranch is under HOA possession for non-compliance and emergency lien enforcement. She said those words fast. Too fast. Like she memorized a script. One officer looked at her, then looked over at me, then back at her, and said, Are you saying that man? The one holding the house keys? The one whose truck is parked in the driveway? Karen swallowed hard. I have documentation, she snapped, waving the clipboard. But her hand was shaking so much the papers rattled. The officer nodded politely and said, All right, we'll take a look. Then he walked over to me. Sir, what's going on here? I took a breath and answered calmly. My name is Daniel Moore. I'm the legal owner of this ranch. I've lived here for 25 years. I just got home early from a trip. These people, I pointed to the strangers walking around with clipboards, are claiming there's an auction happening today. And she, I nodded toward Karen, is behind it. The officer frowned. An auction of your home, without your knowledge? Exactly. He turned to Karen again, holding his hand out for the papers. She hesitated. For a full second she didn't move. Then, reluctantly, she handed over the clipboard. The moment the officer looked at it, something in his expression changed. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just a tiny shift. But I noticed. He said after a long pause, this paperwork is unusual. It doesn't look like any standard lien or foreclosure document. Who prepared this? Karen straightened her back like she was reclaiming her authority. The ETA. As president, I initiated the emergency enforcement process. Emergency for what reason? The officer cut in. Karen blinked fast. Because he broke the rules. He didn't maintain the property. And he didn't notify us about leaving town. That's a violation. Section 18D of the HOA handbook. I stared at her, stunned. You're auctioning off a ranch because I didn't tell you I was going out of town? It's in the rules, she said, lifting her chin. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the desperation in her reasoning was unbelievable. The officer looked at me. Sir, may I see proof you live here? I nodded and took out my wallet. I handed him my driver's license, then jingled my keys. That your truck? He asked. Yep. And the gate code? I told him. He checked. It matched. Karen's face went pale. The officers stepped aside for a moment to speak quietly. The other officer, the younger one, kept glancing at Karen like he was already losing patience with her. After about 30 seconds, the older officer returned. He said firmly, we're going to need a little bit more information. You said this is an HOA matter. We'll need the lien documents filed with the county, proof of certified notices sent to the homeowner, and the compliance violation reports. Karen's mouth opened slightly. She didn't speak. She didn't have those things. The older officer pressed gently. Do you have those with you? Karen stammered. The HOA office has them, not me. We weren't expecting this situation to escalate so quickly. The younger officer raised an eyebrow. So you don't have them? I will get them. I'll get them now. You just need to, he cut her off. Right now it appears you initiated an unauthorized auction of someone else's property. When he said those words, the clipboard collector man, one of the strangers Karen hired, slowly stepped backward like he didn't want to be involved anymore. His eyes widened, and he muttered something about wrong paperwork and not worth it. Karen spun on him. You stay right here. You're contracted. You can't leave. But he ignored her. He put his pen in his pocket and walked to his truck. Another one followed him. Then another. Within seconds, half of the auction inspection team was quietly leaving the property. Karen panicked. She ran after the last guy. You can't leave. We have a schedule. But he drove off. Now it was just me, Karen, the officers, and 3 confused workers who looked like they wished they were anywhere else. The older officer returned the clipboard to Karen. We need proper documentation. Without it, you cannot legally remove a homeowner, let alone auction their property. Karen snapped, "We can under emergency rule enforcement. I have authority." The officer replied calmly, "You have HOA authority. Not legal authority over land ownership." Her face twisted with frustration. "You don't understand. This property is problematic. This man, he leaves the grass too long sometimes." I almost laughed again. I held it in. The officers did not laugh. The younger one sighed loudly and rubbed his forehead. Are you seriously saying you tried to take his ranch because of grass?" Karen's voice got smaller. And other things." "What other things?" he asked. She looked down at her shoes. Her voice went flat. Cold. Bitter. "He doesn't like me. He doesn't respect the HOA rules. He argues. He asks questions. Difficult." The entire property went silent. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about violations. This wasn't about maintenance. This was personal. Deeply personal. The older officer straightened his posture and took a more serious tone. Attempting to seize property out of personal dislike is abuse of authority. And fabricating documents or staging an unauthorized auction is a criminal matter." Karen shook her head fast. "I didn't fabricate anything. I just pushed the rules. Maybe bent them. But I didn't break them." She was unraveling. The older officer looked at me. "Sir, we need you to stay calm. We're going to get the county involved. For now, no one is to enter or remove anything from your property until this is sorted out." I nodded. Understood. The officers then stepped aside to radio dispatch and request a county officer. Meanwhile, Karen paced in small circles, muttering to herself. She wasn't supposed to talk. He wasn't supposed to come back. They weren't supposed to leave. Why did he have to come back early? That last sentence froze me. She wasn't supposed to talk. Who? Talk about what? I didn't know yet. But I would. Because the more Karen panicked, the more pieces of her scheme slipped out between her trembling lips. And by the end of that day, everything would unravel. Everything. When the officers stepped aside to radio the county, the atmosphere on the ranch changed. The tension didn't disappear, it shifted. It became quieter. Heavier. More controlled. Karen stood alone now. No clipboard crew. No fake authority. No fake confidence. She paced small circles near the barn, rubbing her forehead, mumbling to herself like she was rehearsing excuses. Every now and then she'd glance at me, her eyes twitching with a mix of anger and fear. But something else happened then. Something unexpected. One of the workers, a younger guy, maybe 23, wearing dusty boots and carrying a tool bag, walked over to me slowly. He wasn't one of the clipboard inspectors. He looked more like a local contractor. He hesitated before speaking. His voice was low, nervous. "Sir, can I talk to you for a second?" I studied him. He wasn't acting like the others who ran off. He looked uncomfortable, but not guilty. "Yeah," I said quietly. "What's going on?" He looked over at Karen to make sure she wasn't watching, then stepped closer. "I shouldn't even be saying this, but I didn't know we were auctioning your ranch. That wasn't what I was told." My stomach tightened. "Then what were you told?" I asked. He leaned in a bit more. "Karen hired us for a property emergency assessment. Said the owner agreed to it. Said we needed to check the structure because of damage concerns." I shook my head slowly. "There's nothing wrong with the structure," I said. He nodded. "Yeah. I can see that. That's why I started feeling weird when I got here." None of what she said made sense. And then I saw the auction signs in the back of her car. Auction signs. I stared at him. He swallowed hard, then added, "She had files, a whole binder actually. I saw it when she dropped it earlier. It had your name on the tabs. Photos. Notes. Copies of letters. Stuff like that." My breath caught for a second. "Letters?" I repeated. He nodded. "Yeah. Certified mail slips too. She said you ignored them." "I never got any letters." I figured, he said. And sir, I think those letters were fake. Fake letters. Fake violations. Fake warnings. It clicked. Karen hadn't just bent the rules. She had built a paper trail. A fake one, and she planned the whole thing while I was out of town. I asked the guy, "Why are you telling me this?" He shrugged, looking embarrassed. "Because it isn't right. And because my dad lost his farm years ago over some paperwork trickery. It ruined him. When I saw your face today," he paused. "I just couldn't walk away without saying something." I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "You did the right thing." He lifted his tool bag and started backing away. "Just, be careful with her," he said quietly. "She's not playing around." Then he left the property with the last 2 workers. Now it was just me, Karen, and the police. And suddenly, I wasn't confused anymore. I was angry. Karen's mask begins to crumble. Karen noticed the last workers driving off. Her face twisted into something between rage and disbelief. "They can't just leave," she whispered. "They're cowards. They're all cowards." She didn't realize the younger officer was standing behind her. He said, "This situation is already way beyond HOA authority. You're lucky the homeowner hasn't filed charges yet." She spun around. "I didn't do anything wrong." The young officer raised both eyebrows. "So auctioning off someone's ranch without legal documents isn't wrong?" "It was necessary," she snapped. "He never follows rules. He ignores notices. He cut in calmly, "We just verified with the county clerk. There's no lien filed. No violations recorded. No complaints submitted. Nothing." Karen froze. Then her eyes darted around, frantic. "That's impossible. I filed them. I submitted everything. The system must have," the officer interrupted firmly. We spoke directly with the clerk." She checked twice. Karen pressed her fingers to her temples like she was fighting off a migraine. No, someone must have deleted the records. Someone's covering for him." I stepped forward slowly. "Karen, no one is covering for me." She glared at me with this wild, desperate look. "Oh, please," she snapped. "Don't act innocent. You knew exactly what you were doing. You think the HOA rules don't apply to you. You think you can just ignore me." "I ignored you." I cut her off. "I didn't even know you were trying to contact me. I never received a single notice." "Yes, you did," she yelled. "I sent them all." The young officer asked, "How?" "Certified mail." "Yes. Every single one." The older officer stepped beside me. We checked the USPS tracking numbers on your paperwork. None of them exist." Karen blinked. "What?" The older officer continued calmly. "These aren't real tracking numbers. They don't match USPS format." The color drained from Karen's face. Her mouth opened but no words came out. The truth was sitting right there in the open. Big, loud, undeniable. She had forged them. All of them. Every letter. Every notice. Every violation. Every deadline. All fake. The moment she broke, Karen suddenly stepped backward, shaking her head. "This is wrong. This is all wrong. He wasn't supposed to be here today." That sentence again. The officer caught it too. He said carefully, "You keep saying that. Why wasn't he supposed to be here?" Karen clamped her mouth shut. The younger officer pressed, "Who told you he wouldn't be home?" Silence. But her eyes said everything. They darted toward the road. Then toward the ranch entrance. Then toward her SUV. Someone had told her when I left. Someone had told her how long I would be gone. Someone had given her the timing she needed for the auction setup. I didn't know who yet. But I would soon. Karen let out a shaky breath and said, I can't talk about that." The older officer narrowed his eyes. You might want to reconsider. Because right now, this looks like conspiracy. And if there's someone else involved," her eyes widened. "Conspiracy? I didn't conspire. I just followed the plan." The younger officer asked calmly, "What plan?" Karen gasped like she realized she said the wrong thing. "No. I didn't, that's not what She backed away, clutching the clipboard to her chest like a shield. That's it. I'm done talking. I want a lawyer. The officers exchanged looks. The older one radioed the county again. Update, homeowner safe, HOA president refusing to cooperate, possible fraudulent documents involved. Karen sat down abruptly on the ground, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. She stared at the dirt. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked defeated. And terrified. And she should be. Because her plan, whoever helped her create it, was unraveling fast. And soon, the whole truth would come out. But the county officer wasn't the one who finally broke this case open. It was someone else. Someone I never expected. Someone who had been watching Karen for months. And she had evidence Karen never wanted anyone to see. Karen was sitting in the dirt like her whole world had collapsed. The officers were waiting for the county to arrive. I stood by my truck, trying to process everything, the forged letters, the fake notices, the illegal auction, the fact that Karen kept saying I wasn't supposed to be here. And then, something shifted in the air. I heard a slow crunching sound. Gravel under tires. I turned, and there she was. My neighbor, Lisa. The quiet woman who lived 4 houses down. The one who always waved politely but never talked much. She stepped out of her car with a calmness that didn't match the chaos around us. She held something in her hand, a small black USB drive. I stared, confused. What's she doing here? I wondered. Karen noticed her too. And her reaction told me everything. Karen's eyes widened in pure shock. Then fear. Real fear. What are you doing here? Karen spat, scrambling to her feet. Lisa didn't even look at her. She walked straight toward the officers and me with slow, steady steps, as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Daniel, she said softly, I need to talk to you, and to the officers. It's important. Karen stormed toward her. You don't talk to them. You don't talk to him. This is HOA business, and you're not. Lisa held up one hand, stopping her cold. Karen, stop. You've done enough. The way she said it. It was like she'd been waiting months to finally say those words. Karen's mouth snapped shut. The younger officer stepped toward Lisa. Do you have information about what happened here? Lisa nodded. Yes. More than you expect. Karen's voice cracked. No, she's lying. She hates the HOA. She has no right to. Lisa ignored her again. She turned to the officers, her voice steady. I have recordings. Dates. Times. Copies of emails. Photos. Proof of falsified paperwork. Proof of meetings Karen had. Meetings she wasn't supposed to have. My stomach dropped. Recordings. Emails. Proof. Karen lunged forward like she wanted to snatch the USB from Lisa's hand, but the older officer stepped between them. Back up. Now. Karen froze. Her breathing got loud and shallow, like she was on the edge of panic. Lisa looked at me kindly. I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am. I should have come to you earlier. I didn't realize how far Karen was planning to take things, until recently. I swallowed. Lisa, what do you know? She took a deep breath. Everything. Or at least, most of it. The secret meetings. Lisa began explaining, her voice low but clear. For months, I've noticed Karen acting strange. She was obsessed with you. Not in a romantic way, but in a control way. She hated that you didn't bow down to her rules. She hated that other neighbors respected you. She hated that you questioned her decisions. I stared at Lisa, stunned. She continued, and then, she started having private meetings. Not in the HOA office. In her garage. With people I didn't recognize. Men in suits sometimes. Other times, county office workers. And one guy. I think he was a realtor. Karen snapped, you don't know what you saw. You're twisting things. But Lisa kept going. I started recording because I didn't trust her. There were too many stories about HOA corruption. Too many neighbors having problems with her. And when I overheard her saying your name in one of those meetings, I knew something was wrong. My chest tightened. Lisa handed the USB to the younger officer. He took it carefully like it was a piece of evidence from a crime scene. "What exactly is on this?" he asked. Lisa clasped her hands. Recordings of Karen discussing ways to take Daniel's property. How to create fake violation notices. How to make it look like he ignored HOA letters. She planned the entire thing. Karen screamed, "Lies. That's all lies. She hates me." Lisa spoke gently. "Karen, stop." But Karen didn't stop. She stepped closer, shaking, pointing at the USB. "You have no right. You violated HOA privacy. You broke rules." The older officer cut her off. If these allegations are true, the rules broken here weren't by your neighbor." Karen's hands trembled uncontrollably. Then Lisa said something that made Karen's knees almost give out. "I also recorded your call with the realtor. The one where you told him Daniel would be out of town for 2 weeks and that it was the perfect window to file the documents and push the emergency auction." Karen's face drained of all color. I whispered, "That's how she knew I'd be gone." Lisa nodded. "She knew because someone told her." I stepped closer. "Who told you, Karen?" I asked. Silence. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. The older officer repeated the question. Who gave you the information about the homeowner's travel schedule?" Karen's lips trembled. Finally, she whispered, "Someone at the travel agency." My heart dropped. I had told the travel agent my full itinerary when booking. I trusted them. I didn't know anyone there would leak my schedule to someone like her. Lisa added quietly, "She paid them." I saw the message on her phone. A bank transfer screenshot. The younger officer asked, "Is that in the recordings too?" Lisa nodded. Karen let out a weak, broken sob. The evidence pile up. The older officer radioed dispatch. "Update. We have substantial digital evidence suggesting premeditated fraud, conspiracy, and attempted unlawful seizure of property. Requesting county sheriff and investigator." Karen sank to the ground again, shaking her head. "I just wanted order. I just wanted him to follow the rules. I wasn't trying to what?" I asked quietly. "To steal my ranch." Karen's eyes filled with tears, but not remorse. It was panic. I wasn't stealing it. I was enforcing stability. The HOA needs strong leadership. People don't listen unless you give consequences. And you, Daniel, you challenged me. I stared at her. "You were willing to destroy my entire life over that." She didn't answer. She just whispered, "You weren't supposed to be here. You ruined everything." The officers had heard enough. The younger one asked Lisa, "Can you come with us to the station to file a statement?" Lisa nodded. "Of course." Then she turned to me. "Daniel, there's more. Not just recordings. I have Karen's printed emails too. And a copy of the fake violation notices. I kept them because, honestly, I knew something like this could happen." My voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She looked down. "Fear." Karen threatened me too. She threatened a lot of neighbors. That hit me hard. Because suddenly, I realized this wasn't just about me. Other people had been suffering under Karen's power too. But now everything was coming to light. All of it. And the county sheriff was on the way. And soon, Karen wouldn't be running anything ever again. By the time the county sheriff arrived, the scene at my ranch had transformed completely. What started as a chaotic, tense confrontation had become a carefully controlled environment, controlled by the truth, by evidence, and by people who finally refused to let Karen's lies dictate reality. Karen, still sitting in the dirt near the barn, had lost all her authority. Her clipboard was discarded nearby, the papers fluttering in the wind like defeated flags. Her phone lay on the ground, her trembling hands no longer reaching for it. I stood near Lisa, who had provided the crucial USB evidence and copies of forged emails. The officers looked calm but alert, exchanging low whispers while coordinating their next steps. The younger officer had already begun cataloging Karen's documents and cross-checking them with county records. Karen's face, pale and tight with panic, told the entire story. For once, she couldn't manipulate anyone, not the workers, not the neighbors, not even herself. The sheriff takes control. Sheriff Daniels, a tall, middle-aged man with a commanding presence, stepped onto the property and immediately assessed the situation. He scanned Karen sitting on the ground, then me, then the scattered evidence, and finally the officers documenting the scene. "All right," he said, voice low and steady, "let's get one thing clear. Nobody's leaving until I understand what happened here." Karen tried to regain her voice. "Sheriff, I'm the HOA president." He was, in violation. Sheriff Daniels held up a hand. He said, calm but firm, "Being HOA president does not give you the right to seize someone's property, forge legal documents, or hold an auction without proper county approval. You understand that, correct?" Karen's eyes darted between the sheriff and the officers. Her lips trembled, but she nodded faintly. Yes. I thought you thought what?" the sheriff asked sharply. "I was enforcing rules," she whispered. "Rules," the sheriff echoed, disbelief clear in his voice. "These are criminal acts, not HOA rules. You have multiple counts of potential fraud here, forged documents, and conspiracy to unlawfully take property. That's not enforcement, that's a crime." Karen flinched. Her head lowered. I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because the sheriff understood the situation and was taking immediate action. Dread because the consequences for Karen were now very real. "The evidence speaks." Lisa handed the USB to the sheriff, who quickly plugged it into his laptop. The audio recordings played clearly, Karen's voice, planning the auction, coordinating with outside agents, even discussing how I would be out of town and the perfect timing for her scheme. He paused the recording at key points, his eyebrows raising with each incriminating statement. Then he looked at me. "Sir, this is solid evidence of premeditated fraud. We'll need formal statements, but this is enough to detain her while we investigate further." Karen's lips quivered, and her hands began shaking uncontrollably. She realized the evidence couldn't be denied. Every forged notice, every fake email, every manipulated board members' meeting, it was all here, captured by Lisa, documented and undeniable. I felt a rush of vindication. For months, I had been questioning my sanity. Was I overreacting? Was this really happening? Now, every fear I had was confirmed, and I wasn't powerless anymore. The HOA board's reckoning. While the sheriff processed the evidence, I called for an emergency HOA board meeting right there, on my property. Karen had tried to control the board for years, manipulating 2 members with fear and 1 with silent compliance. But with the sheriff present and evidence in hand, the balance had shifted. The board members arrived quickly, expressions anxious but curious. As soon as they saw the USB, the forged letters, and the printed emails, their confusion turned to shock. "Karen," one of the board members finally spoke, voice trembling, "is this true?" Karen didn't answer. She avoided their gaze, her face flushed with panic. Another board member, the one who had quietly disliked Karen for months, stood up. "All of this, all the fake letters, the supposed violations, she manipulated us. She's been lying to us this entire time." Karen's lips parted, but no words came out. I spoke slowly, clearly, letting every word land. "These are the documents she forged to try to take my property while I was away. These are recordings of her planning the entire scheme, the auction, the forged notices, everything. She's not enforcing HOA rules. She's committing fraud." The board sat in stunned silence. It was clear they hadn't realized the extent of her manipulation until now. Sheriff Daniels stepped in. "Board members, you will need to cooperate with the county investigation. Any further interference or attempts to cover this up will also be considered a violation of the law." Karen sank lower, realizing her control over the board had evaporated. Karen's first official confrontation with consequences after the board's reaction, the sheriff finally addressed Karen directly. "Karen, you are being placed under temporary detention for fraud investigation, document forgery, and attempted unlawful seizure of property," he said. Karen's face turned pale, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't. I was just trying to enforce the rules." "Enforce the rules," the sheriff repeated, incredulous. "You nearly stole someone's home." That's not enforcement, that's criminal behavior. Her voice cracked. But I thought, it would be legal if It isn't legal, the sheriff said firmly. Not in any way. Karen trembled as the officers read her rights. For the first time, she was silent. The confident, controlling HOA president had vanished, replaced by a desperate woman who realized her game was over. The community reaction word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Neighbors who had suffered under Karen's harassment for months, even years, began showing up to the ranch. They wanted to see the situation firsthand. Some shook their heads, others whispered apologies that they hadn't come forward sooner. Lisa, who had provided the critical evidence, stood with me. We watched as people I'd known for years quietly acknowledged the relief of seeing justice begin to take shape. This isn't just about your ranch, Daniel, Lisa said softly. Karen's been targeting others for years. You've just been the biggest target, and you happen to be prepared enough to fight back. I nodded. And now, everyone will know. The first step toward justice. Sheriff Daniels summarized the next steps. Karen would remain under temporary investigation while the county reviewed all evidence. Formal charges of fraud, forgery, and attempted unlawful seizure were likely to be filed. The HOA board would be suspended from making any unilateral decisions until a full audit was conducted. I was assured my property was secure and that no one could attempt another auction or action against it without legal authority. I felt a wave of relief. Months of harassment, sleepless nights, forged notices, and fake threats had finally led to action. Karen, meanwhile, sat in stunned silence. Every plan she had counted on had collapsed within hours. Every secret, every lie, every manipulation exposed. She looked at me once, eyes wide, before finally lowering her gaze. You ruined everything, she whispered again, but now it sounded more like a plea than a threat. I shook my head slowly. No, Karen. You ruined your own everything. The days after Karen's arrest were surreal. I woke up each morning expecting something else, another letter, another threat, another fake notice. But none came. The ranch was quiet. Peaceful. For the first time in months, I could breathe without constant anxiety gnawing at the edges of my mind. The county investigation continued. Sheriff Daniels and his team meticulously went through every piece of evidence Lisa had provided, the USB recordings, emails, forged violation letters, even screenshots showing Karen coordinating with the travel agency to track my absence. Every step of the plan Karen had taken to seize my ranch was documented and undeniable. I spent hours on the porch, watching the horses graze in the morning light, thinking about how close I had come to losing everything. My home. My property. My history. It had been months of subtle harassment, letters, emails, fake board meetings, and intimidation. I had learned Karen's obsession with control wasn't just about petty HOA rules, it was about power, greed, and self-interest. The HOA board faces consequences. The HOA board, which had been manipulated for years, was forced to face its own accountability. The 2 members who had complied with Karen's schemes were temporarily suspended, and the board itself was placed under state review. At the first post-incident board meeting, I sat quietly, letting the officers and county representatives explain the full extent of Karen's actions. You allowed this to happen under your watch, one officer told the board members. Documents were forged. Notices were faked. Property was nearly taken illegally. All of this could have been prevented if oversight had been maintained. The members, some of whom had previously supported Karen, now looked ashamed and embarrassed. One of them muttered quietly, "We trusted her judgment too much." It was clear that while Karen had been the main actor, the lack of accountability within the HOA allowed her schemes to escalate unchecked. Karen's realization: Karen remained in temporary custody, but news of her exposure spread quickly. Some neighbors called it justice served, while others were still shocked that an HOA president could attempt something so calculated. During one of the early hearings, I learned that Karen had finally realized the magnitude of her actions. She had planned to intimidate me, steal the property, and profit from the oil hidden beneath the land, all without anyone discovering the truth. But Lisa's recordings, the forged evidence, and my early return had completely dismantled her plan. Reports indicated that Karen spent hours in custody reviewing her own phone, emails, and files, trying to understand how everything had collapsed so quickly. In those moments, she finally saw the consequences of obsession and greed. Not just the legal consequences, but the loss of respect, trust, and credibility. She had controlled so many people for so long, but now the one person she thought she could manipulate, me, had turned the tables completely. Neighbors begin to heal. One of the unexpected parts of this aftermath was how the neighborhood began to heal. Neighbors who had been silent out of fear finally came forward. Some shared stories of minor harassment, property inspections that had never been required, or pressure from HOA committees. With Karen's exposure, they felt empowered to speak, to question, and to participate in the HOA more actively. Meetings were no longer dictated by fear, and rules were revisited to ensure that no individual could hold such unchecked power again. Lisa, who had quietly gathered evidence, became a local hero among the residents. Her bravery in documenting Karen's actions not only saved my property but also helped protect the entire community from further manipulation. Personal reflection for me, the experience changed a lot. I realized how easily power can be abused when there's no accountability. I also learned the importance of observation, preparation, and trusting the people who see the truth. Coming back early from my trip wasn't just luck, it was a pivotal decision that saved my ranch. If I had stayed away, Karen's plan might have succeeded. I also realized the value of allies. Ben, Lisa, and even the workers who spoke up made a huge difference. Without them, the fraud might have continued unnoticed for months, if not years. And I understood the power of calm determination. Even when Karen screamed, threatened, and tried to intimidate everyone around her, staying calm and presenting evidence in an organized, factual way made all the difference. Moving forward today, my ranch is secure. The horses are healthy, the fences are intact, and the property feels like a sanctuary again. The HOA is under state review, with new leadership committed to transparency. Rules about property inspections, communications, and board authority have been rewritten. Fraud checks are now required before any significant action can take place. Karen, once so confident and controlling, is now facing the consequences of her obsession. Her reputation is ruined, her power gone, and her credibility shattered. I don't know what the future holds for her legally, but I do know that she can't manipulate or threaten anyone else in this neighborhood ever again. Lessons learned. Looking back, I realized there were several important lessons. Trust, but verify. Always check notices, communications, and claims even if they come from someone in authority. Allies matter. People like Ben and Lisa made all the difference. Trust those who genuinely support you. Document everything. Karen's downfall came because her actions were recorded and saved. Without proof, her plan might have succeeded. Stay calm in the face of intimidation. Karen tried to provoke fear and panic. Staying calm allowed me to assess the situation and act strategically. Power without accountability is dangerous. The HOA allowed Karen to operate unchecked. Always insist on transparency and checks within any organization. By learning these lessons, I didn't just protect my ranch, I helped create a safer, fairer community for everyone. The final days of the investigation felt surreal. After months of uncertainty, stress, and tension, I finally felt a sense of control return to my life. Karen had been officially charged with multiple counts: fraud, forgery, conspiracy to unlawfully seize property, and attempted intimidation. The county prosecutors confirmed that she would face trial for each of these charges. Her position as HOA president was permanently revoked, and the HOA board was placed under long-term state supervision. For the first time in months, I could walk around my ranch without fear. The animals were calm, the fences were intact, and the fields were peaceful. Every morning, the sun rose over my land just as it had before all this chaos, but now it felt different, brighter, calmer, and safe. The community responds. The neighborhood finally began to recover. People who had previously feared Karen's influence were now speaking openly. They shared stories about minor harassment, intimidation, or false accusations they had suffered under her leadership. Meetings became transparent, open to all residents. New checks were established. Any major action required notarized approval from multiple board members. Notices had to be sent directly through certified channels, verified by county records. Any alleged violation required physical inspection and documented evidence. Neighbors thanked me quietly, some even apologetically, for standing up to Karen. But I knew the real hero was Lisa, whose courage in documenting the plan, recordings, and emails made it all possible. Karen's reaction to her downfall was a mix of disbelief, panic, and bitterness. Once the news of her arrest and the invalidation of her actions spread, her reputation evaporated almost overnight. The HOA members she had controlled finally spoke out against her. Even those who had been intimidated for years came forward, recounting lies, threats, and fabricated violations. Each story added weight to the case against her. During one court pretrial hearing, the prosecutor summarized the evidence: the forged letters with fake tracking numbers, fake violation notices claiming property neglect, her recorded conversations planning the emergency auction and coordinating with outside agents, evidence that she paid a travel agency to confirm my absence. The judge looked at Karen and said quietly, "This behavior demonstrates a premeditated attempt to deprive a property owner of their rightful land through manipulation, intimidation, and fraud." Karen looked around the courtroom, realizing the full scope of what she had done, and for the first time, she was silent. Personal reflection. Sitting on my porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on everything that had happened. The situation had taught me that vigilance and calm action were more powerful than fear and intimidation. Karen had relied on fear, manipulation, and secrecy. I had relied on truth, evidence, and allies. And the truth always finds a way. I thought about all the signs I had missed before: the minor violations she exaggerated, the unnecessary inspections, the subtle attempts to control the HOA board. They had seemed small at the time, almost insignificant. But now I saw how they were all pieces of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle she had tried to use to steal my home. I realized that life isn't just about defending what you own. It's about defending what's right. Standing up to dishonesty and manipulation isn't easy, but it's necessary. The role of allies. I owe a huge part of the resolution to Ben and Lisa. Ben, he noticed Karen's suspicious actions early and warned me. Without his insight and persistence, I might have walked right into her trap. Lisa, she risked her safety and reputation to gather recordings, emails, and evidence that finally exposed Karen. Without her courage, I don't know how we would have stopped the auction. Their support reminded me that community matters. Trusting the right people and asking for help when needed can prevent disasters. Even the young workers, who hesitated at first, ultimately spoke up. Their honesty and willingness to share the truth mattered more than they realized. Restoring the ranch and moving forward. The ranch now feels more like home than ever. The gates are secure. The fences are repaired. The horses run freely without the fear that someone might interfere. I've even taken steps to ensure the hidden potential of the land, the oil deposits Karen had been so obsessed with, will remain protected under legal oversight. I'm working with a trustworthy geological consultant to understand the resources without letting greed control the process. The HOA is no longer a source of fear. With transparent leadership, rules are applied fairly, and residents feel safe. The biggest change, though, is how I see people. I've learned to recognize subtle manipulation, the kind that builds slowly, and to respond with calm strategy instead of panic. I've learned the importance of recording, documenting, and having allies. Most of all, I've learned that even in a world where some people will try to abuse authority, truth and justice can prevail. The final word on Karen. Karen lost everything she tried to gain. Her position as HOA president is gone forever. Her reputation is destroyed. The trust of everyone she manipulated is irreparable. Legal consequences are pending. And she learned a final, crucial lesson: obsession, greed, and control come at a price. The very schemes she spent months planning crumbled in a matter of hours because of courage, evidence, and truth. Closing thoughts. I often think about how small actions lead to life-changing outcomes. Returning early from my trip was unexpected, but it saved my property. Listening to Ben's warnings kept me alert. Trusting Lisa and her evidence revealed the truth no one else could see. If there's one message I want anyone listening to this story to remember, it's this: justice is rarely instant, but it is inevitable when truth is on your side. Obsession and greed can't outlast preparation, courage, and honesty. I look at my ranch now, the sunset over the fields, the quiet horses grazing. The peace I fought for is finally mine. And while I will never forget Karen's attempt to steal everything, I know one thing clearly: I didn't just defend a ranch. I defended my life, my community, and the principle that manipulation and fraud cannot win against truth and perseverance. And that, finally, feels like justice.